Monetary thermodynamics, how Bitcoin emerges as a battery for the global credit reactor. Summary statement. Modern fiat economies increasingly resemble interconnected credit reactors, where debt expansion functions as the fuel powering economic growth. As these systems mature, the recursive nature of credit creation, cross-border capital flows, and compounding debt burdens generate growing instability, inflationary pressure, and systemic fragility. Under this framework, Bitcoin emerges not merely as a speculative asset or digital gold, but as a potential monetary battery, a hard-scarcity reserve asset capable of absorbing excess monetary energy from the global credit reactor. By acting as an overflow sink and economic yardstick, Bitcoin may offer a stabilization layer that dampens runaway credit expansion, stores excess financial energy, and provides a mechanism for releasing capital back into the economy in a more controlled and sustainable manner. Act 1. The locomotive economy. To understand modern monetary systems, it is often useful to begin with something tangible. The Industrial Revolution was powered by the locomotive engine. Coal was extracted from the ground, transported across freight networks, and fed into steam engines that converted stored energy into motion. Yet the locomotive itself was only one part of a much larger system. Coal mines supplied fuel, freight trains supplied stations, stations supplied locomotives, locomotives transported people, goods, and resources. The entire railway network functioned like a circulatory system for industrial civilization. What made the system possible was not merely the engine itself, but the fuel source that powered it. The monetary system of the era operated in a surprisingly similar manner. Gold served as the foundational collateral layer underpinning economic activity. Nations mined gold much like they mined coal. The supply expanded slowly, was difficult to extract, and required substantial effort to produce. Gold's scarcity made it useful as a store of value, a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a reserve asset. In this sense, gold functioned as the monetary analog of coal. It was the scarce fuel reserve powering the economic engine. The economy expanded, but expansion remained constrained by the difficulty of creating additional monetary fuel. The system was imperfect, but it possessed a natural throttle. Act 2. The oil economy. The next major transition was not merely monetary, it was energetic. As industrial civilization matured, coal gradually gave way to oil. Oil possessed superior energy density, portability, flexibility, and scalability. Entire industries emerged around its extraction, transportation, refinement, and distribution. At the monetary level, a similar transformation occurred. When the United States abandoned formal gold convertibility in 1971, the world did not suddenly stop demanding dollars. Instead, a new source of demand emerged: oil. Through arrangements with major energy exporters, particularly Saudi Arabia, oil became priced predominantly in U.S. dollars. Because oil powered transportation, manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, and electricity generation, demand for energy became demand for dollars. The dollar effectively inherited a new energetic foundation. The global economy entered a period of extraordinary expansion. Industrial production accelerated. Global trade exploded. Financial markets deepened. Capital became increasingly mobile. The engine became larger, faster, and more interconnected. But the system was also becoming more complex. Act 3. The credit reactor. At some point, the metaphor of an oil engine begins to break down. Modern fiat systems no longer behave like conventional combustion engines. They behave more like nuclear reactors. Under a traditional combustion system, inputs and outputs remain relatively linear. More fuel produces more heat. Less fuel produces less heat. The relationship is understandable and manageable. Credit systems behave differently. Every new loan creates additional purchasing power. That purchasing power can generate economic activity. That activity can support further lending. That lending can create additional purchasing power. The process becomes recursive. Debt generates more debt. Credit generates more credit. Leverage generates additional leverage. The system begins exhibiting chain reaction behavior. This is where the nuclear analogy becomes useful. The modern financial system consists of commercial banks, central banks, sovereign debt markets, shadow banking systems, global capital markets, and cross-border liquidity networks. Each functions as part of an interconnected reactor architecture. Unlike a locomotive, the challenge is no longer generating energy. The challenge becomes controlling it. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Act 4. The Debt Overhang Problem. Initially, the credit reactor produces extraordinary results. Credit finances, infrastructure, housing, manufacturing, technological innovation, logistics, industrial expansion, and economic development. As long as productive output grows faster than debt accumulation, the reactor remains relatively stable. But a structural tension eventually emerges. Debt compounds exponentially. Productive growth does not. Real economies face constraints: demographics, resource limitations, market saturation, aging infrastructure, declining productivity gains, and maintenance burdens. Economic growth tends to follow an S-curve. Debt does not. Debt follows compounding mathematics. Over time, increasingly large amounts of credit are required merely to maintain existing economic activity. More fuel is required to generate the same output. The engine becomes less efficient. The reactor requires greater intensity to maintain stable production. This is where many of the pathologies of modern economies emerge. Wealth inequality expands. Cantillon effects intensify. Asset inflation outpaces wage growth. Housing affordability deteriorates. Purchasing power erodes. Economic growth increasingly depends upon debt expansion rather than productivity expansion. The system becomes fragile. Inflation within this framework behaves less like a policy error and more like energetic waste. It resembles heat escaping from an overworked machine. The harder the system must run, the greater the waste generated. Act 5. The Bitcoin Battery. Once the credit system is viewed as a reactor, a new question naturally emerges. Where should the excess energy go? Modern central banks attempt to regulate credit creation through interest rates, reserve requirements, liquidity facilities, quantitative easing, and regulatory oversight. But these tools operate with delays. They are reactive rather than predictive. Furthermore, no nation operates in isolation. Japan's credit system affects America. America's credit system affects Europe. Europe affects Asia. Capital flows globally. Every sovereign reactor influences every other sovereign reactor. This creates a fundamental control problem. The majority of the reactor's energetic output currently flows directly into financial markets and the real economy. The result is periodic overheating. Bubbles emerge. Asset prices inflate. Instability accumulates. The Bitcoin battery thesis proposes a different architecture. Instead of directing the majority of newly created monetary energy directly into the economy, a significant portion could be diverted into a hard-scarcity reserve asset. Bitcoin becomes the candidate, not because it is speculative, not because it is digital gold, but because it functions as an economic yardstick. Its supply remains fixed. Its issuance remains predictable. Its production requires real-world energy expenditure. Bitcoin mining already performs a related function in energy markets. Across the world, stranded energy resources are increasingly monetized through mining operations. Energy that would otherwise be wasted is converted into Bitcoin and stored as financial capital. The same conceptual framework can be applied to monetary energy. Bitcoin becomes a monetary battery, a storage mechanism, an overflow sink, a reserve layer capable of absorbing excess credit-generated energy before it spills uncontrollably into the broader economy. Act 6. Monetary thermodynamics. At its deepest level, this discussion is not really about Bitcoin, nor is it primarily about gold, oil, debt, or central banking. It is about energy management. Every advanced civilization must solve the same problem. How do you harness powerful energetic systems without allowing them to become destructive? Locomotives required fuel depots and rail infrastructure. Oil economies required pipelines, refineries, and distribution networks. Nuclear reactors require containment systems, cooling systems, and control rods. The question facing modern monetary systems may be similar. If fiat credit systems inherently generate recursive expansion, then stabilization mechanisms become increasingly important. This is where hard monetary assets may serve a deeper role. Historically, gold functioned as a natural dampener on expansion. Its scarcity constrained growth. Its extraction imposed limits. Bitcoin introduces a digital version of this principle. A globally accessible, verifiable, scarce monetary asset that can function as an overflow absorption layer within a highly energetic financial system. Whether Bitcoin ultimately fulfills this role remains uncertain. But the framework suggests an intriguing possibility. The future of monetary stability may not depend solely on better central banking. It may depend upon building monetary batteries capable of absorbing the excess energy generated by increasingly powerful credit reactors. In this sense, Bitcoin represents something larger than a financial asset. It may represent the emergence of a stabilization architecture for an increasingly interconnected and energetic global monetary system. And if that interpretation proves correct, Bitcoin's most important contribution may not be replacing the reactor. It may be helping civilization learn how to contain it.